not normally, always do it on a curve. Okay, the more defined the curve is, the closer you clip. You put your clips. Okay, so normally that's 1/4 inch.
Smoother.
Okay, yeah, so it'll smooth. So what you do is on a mild curve like this one, you clip, and then just as long as you can straighten that line out with no stress, then you know you have enough. Okay, again, it's, you know, there's no formula that says this many degrees, you clip so many partial inches or fractions of an inch. You just have to, from experience, know that. You don't want it to pull once you turn your facing to the inside. So if you get any restriction when you turn this, and you can feel the seam allowance tight underneath, then you gotta go in and clip a little closer. Okay, so once you've done that, okay, I have all my clippings, then take your facing and open it up to the seam and finger press the seam right along the facing edge, like so. Okay, don't iron it, because you can't iron it because you're going to smash everything down. So just go and finger press, see? And then you're going to understitch. Understitch means, again, sewing the facing to the seam allowance right on the 1/16 of an inch. Okay, that's understitching. Okay, so just facing to the seam allowance. So understitching means it's not going to show. Okay, that stitch is not going to show. Okay, so you're doing it on the facing because the facing doesn't show on the garment. Okay, no need to backstitch on any of the stitching paths that I showed you up in the board. Okay, only when you're doing a seam do you need to backstitch. Okay, there we go. So you notice that I'm always kind of putting a little tension, making sure that the seam is fully exposed. Okay, if you at all have a little tuck there, you won't get a nice finish at the end. Okay, so you'll constantly see me kind of doing this. Okay, to make sure. Okay, now as you approach your V, be sure you can identify it clearly. Okay? The solid, you can tell. Some of the prints, it's a little harder to tell where that V is, but be sure you can identify it. If you have to, stick a little pin over there so you know exactly where it is. Okay, so now what you're doing is you're understitching. You want to get a little closer as you approach the V. Okay, get closer to your seam. So I'm gonna walk my, because I know I can't get really close and hit the V by pushing that foot pedal.
And then just text me.
Okay. I got like right up there next to my V, right? Almost on the seam. Okay, so it threads width away from my seam. Okay, then that way, see, watch what you do with the facing. You can easily move the bulk of the facing away, pivot around, do a little tug so you don't have a tuck there, see? Look, I'm having to tug a little bit so I don't stitch a tuck in my V. Because otherwise, look, if I don't tug, look, and so right there, I'm gonna get a tuck. Okay, so lightly, not a lot, but just to remove that tuck, tug on your facing. And then finish up on your understitching. Okay. So now take your facing, put it to the back side, and hopefully you have a really clean, neat V. And then you can finger press, or you can go to the iron if you want to. Finger press. I'm going to pin just to keep it down while I'm finger pressing the other side. Okay, or go to the iron, like I said, and press. But you see, by doing the understitching, it really holds that facing down. It is Look how clean the front looks. Without the understitching, you might have this going on where your seam is showing, and you don't want that. Okay, so you want a really clean look. Okay, okay. Now we're going to later. I'm going to show you how to serge a V shape. Okay, we've been up to this point serging straight lines, and fairly easy, right? Everybody can do it. Okay, now we have to learn to pivot a corner. Okay, so as soon as I'm done with this one, we'll go to the serge machine, and then
is that it for that one?
yeah. Oh no, then we're gonna top stitch, but I got top stitch last after we serge. Okay, so let's jump onto our round neckline, our curved neckline. Okay, first thing you're gonna do is again back the body. So on the inside, you're going to pin your interfacing onto your body.
On the right side of it.
No, inside, the back side.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the back. See, that's the outside. Okay,
Christina, she's doing the round.
Okay, so first step, so you could stay stitch this in. Remember I talked about stay stitching and whether to do it or not. It's just another step. You could, if you want to take the time to sew the interfacing to the body instead of pinning it on. Okay. But I don't like to build a lot of stitching into my seams because it gets bulky. So I'm just going to pin it. Okay, so then you're going to do right side of facing, just like what we did with the other one. Right sides together. Okay, pin, and you're going to stitch 5/8 of an inch. Okay, do not unpin your interfacing from your body piece. You always keep these two pieces pinned together until the very end. Okay, so right now you're going to put facing the body. Okay. I'm gonna have to borrow some. Okay, so I'm gonna pin at the center. And I'm gonna pin on the ends. Can somebody pass me some pins on one of the machines? Oh, thank you. Let me borrow. Thank you. Okay, so you can put as many pins as you want, but again, it does take up time. So I like to just put at the beginning and in the middle. Okay, so the middle and then the beginning and end. If you want to, you can put more here for those of you who don't feel comfortable yet manipulating your machine or working your machine, you can do that. Okay, whenever you sew a curve, what you want to do is shorten your stitch length. So I'm going to a 12, and the thinking behind that is if your stitch length is too long when you're going around a curve, you're creating tiny little corners like this. So you don't really get a smooth line. And when you have shorter stitch lengths, it takes more stitches to form that nice smooth curve. So your end results are better. Okay.
So for the GQ, like
So 2.5, yeah, about there. Okay, so 5/8, so quarter, half, and 5. Right there. Okay, so I shorten my stitch length.
And it's the 5/8 line you said on the.
You're stitching on the 5/8. Okay, now go slow because as you get through this area, almost every stitch is a turn, a slight turn of your fabric.
And you backstitch, right?
Yes, it's a seam. So you are back stitching. Okay, so go slow. Because you want to get a nice smooth curve. You don't want to run off and go straight over here. Okay, so go slow. See? You see how my hand is moving my fabric? But you want to move it as you're sewing. Otherwise, you're constantly stressing your work. So keep your curve flat. And then as you're sewing, look, guide it through and move little at a time. So I'm sewing like a couple stitches at a time. You see how my fabric's always flat. You don't want to fight it and go against what you're doing, because you're going to stretch that curve, even though we have interfacing. So stop, remove your pins. When you get to the end, back stitch. Okay, now, okay, with the iron-on interfacing, we didn't have to trim the interfacing down because we trimmed it ahead of time. With sew-in, that's going to be your first step. You're going to take your scissors, lay it down, not this way, lay it down, and trim along that stitching line. Okay, so you're leaving about a 1/16 of an inch. Okay, and that'll reduce, see, we got rid of this much as far as the bulkiness in our seam. Okay, so lay it down and run your blade carefully along your stitching. So you leaving about a 1/16 of an inch. So this is reducing the bulk in your seam by trimming the seam allowance of the interfacing down. And the sharper point you have on your scissors, the better, of course. That way. And you're only working the tip of your scissors. Okay, so there we go. So we got rid of that layer of interfacing in our seam. Now you can trim your seam allowance down to a 1/4 of an inch. Or if you want to look at it as half the seam allowance, you can look at it that way too. That's a little bit bigger than a 1/4 of an inch, but that's fine. You never want to have a seam allowance that's less than a 1/4 of an inch. It always has to be a minimum of a 1/4 of an inch. Okay, so trim along your neckline curve and get into the habit of making it nice and even. You don't cut it so some parts are thick and some parts are thin. You really need to train your eye to recognize space and then make things nice and even and neat. Okay, so we got rid of that. Okay, now you have to clip, because now this curve is much more defined than our straight one, you know, which was a slight bend to a straight line. This one you can see is really round. Okay, so go around, and I use my fingernail as a stopper. Okay, you need to have a really sharp scissors with a point. Okay, and then you're going to cut your curve, clip your curve all the way around, and about a 1/4 of an inch as you get into this area. And again, your test is going to be whether you can straighten out this curved seam, and then you know that you put in sufficient amounts of clips spaced close enough together. Okay, so about a 1/4 of an inch apart. There's no need for you to do an 1/8 of an inch that close together. It's just added work, and then it almost is bad for the seam because you're cutting it so close that the yarns are going to ravel or unravel, whichever way you want to look at it. Both use is correct. Yeah, ravel or unravel. Okay, so go up along your neckline. Use your point of your scissors. Do not cut your stitching, because then you have to re-sew that seam. Okay, but you have to go all the way to the stitching. The closer you get, the better end result you got. Okay, so right there. Now, to test, all you do is you pull that open. If you can straighten out that curved line, then you know that, see, you have enough clips in there to allow you to turn the facing to the back side or the inside. Okay, so just don't stretch it out. Yeah, just pull it like this to see if you can straighten that out. Okay, now same under stitching. Okay, so turn the your pattern, your fabric to the outside, your body piece. Lift your facing, finger press. Make sure you press your seam all the way open. Now under stitch. Okay, we were at, I'm not gonna stay there. I'm still working this curve.
So you're gonna stay at 12?
Stay at 12. Yeah, this is still, I'm gonna lengthen when we do top stitch. Okay, there it is. Under stitch again, tacking the facing to the seam allowance. Okay, now with this curve sample, look, you can straighten out and sew. So you don't have to keep it in a curve like when we initially attach the inner facing and the facing. When you do the under stitching, because it's already clipped, you see how I'm straightening it out, this line, my sewing path. So it's clipped, and you can tell. If you're having a difficult time at this point, then you know your clips aren't close enough together. Okay, but if it freely goes and you can straighten out that curved line and you don't feel any tight stress on that seam allowance, then you know that it's good. Okay, so go slow because you got to get it nice and even, a 1/16 of an inch from that seam. Ran out of thread. How you like that?
Perfect timing.
Perfect timing. Lucky I had someone there. Different color, but that's okay. So if at all you do run out of thread, don't have to rip the whole thing apart. All you do is you overlap. See where it ended, just go back along the previous stitch a good 1/2 inch and just overlap your stitches, and that will secure the 2 loose ends. You don't have to back stitch. Okay, so under stitch. Now turn your facing to the back side. Nice and clean, round, hopefully even curve on both sides of center. And then finger press. We'll take it to the iron later, but to prevent us from having to jump up and down, back and forth, save time, you know. Learn to finger press. Okay? Okay, so it's gonna look like that. And then that. Now, last step. Oh, we should press this. Go to the iron and do a good press on that neckline, because your next step, just say I went to the iron and I pressed. Okay. Your next step, starting from the middle, you're going to pin the facing to the interfacing. Okay? So it's nice and flat. Yeah? So from the inside, lay everything nice and flat because you would have pressed it with the iron. Starting from the middle, see? Grab your facing and pin it to the interfacing.
Not to the body though, right?
No, not to the body. See? Just like that. Lay it, well, it should be pressed flat. So that's okay if the facing and the interfacing don't match up exact, like this. That's fine. Okay, we're gonna do several more steps. Okay, so again, lay it flat. Keep it flat, don't raise it up in the air. Pin your interfacing to your facing. Okay. and you're not pinning it to the body, okay, just facing to the interfacing. Okay, so for work from your centers up to your shoulder. Okay, now I'm removing all those pins under there, but you see how I never lift my work? I'm laying everything on the table, just lifting the edge of my facing and my interfacing. Okay, so what you've done is you've secured your facing to the interfacing. We're going to then, okay, I'm gonna lengthen my stitch at this point. I'm going to base these two together. Okay, so 1/4 inch in from the edge. Using the fabric as your guide. You see, I'm not using my interfacing for following the width. I'm using my fabric. Okay, just line up your fabric edge with your foot, your presser foot, and you should be sewing about 1/4 inch, basting the two layers together. You see, I'm not fighting my work. If you fight it, then you're going to end up with drag lines and stretching of the facing. I just keep everything nice and flat. It's already pinned. And every stitch, you just gently move. Oh,
I think your bobby stopped.
Again. There must be a lot of shortness in here. Give you a break. My bobbin stopped.